Good. All right, guys, I'll go ahead and get started with you guys. Hopefully you all got a paper on beekeeping. My name's Robby Branscum. I'm one of the ag teachers here at Stillwater. Does anybody else have beehives at your school farm or your ag building or anything like that? Where you at?
Burns Flat.
Burns Flat? Okay. So this is something that is pretty new to us. I'll get to show you guys these here towards the end, and if there's a break in between, if you guys want to check them out. This is something really, I knew nothing about beekeeping about 2 years ago. And for me, I was really concerned. I mean, you guys think about the liability, right? Like we see this like horror show in our head of like some kid outside is like covered in bees and like stung and we're getting fired and all that kind of stuff. So I was worried about that. I was worried about killing the bees, obviously, because I don't know anything about bees when we got started. And fortunately, only one of those two things happened, and I'll explain that here in a little bit. It's not the kid. I still have my job. Back in 2018, we went to National FFA Convention, and on the back, I've given you guys a sheet that'll give you just kind of some basic information. But on the back of the bottom, there's a couple resources. And if you go to National Convention, even if you're not interested in beekeeping, there's the Hunter's Honeybee Farm. And it is the single best tour I've ever taken kids on. It was fantastic. It's about 45 minutes south of Indianapolis. We went the same night as the Garth Brooks concert. The kids were ticked. And then they got there and they loved it. And like me and the kids, our mouths were just open the whole time. This guy was fantastic. He was a science teacher, but also a fourth-generation beekeeper. So he knew how to connect with kids, and he knew so many nerd facts. And I don't know, if you're like me, like Mr. Nipper will tell you, like I'm a major nerd and I love random facts. And so he taught us a lot about this. So with these honeybees, and I'm going to give you guys some honey in here in a minute to try, not from our hive. But bees aren't the only thing that make honey. So ants make honey, wasps make honey. There are other bugs and insects that make honey, but they are the only ones that make it in large enough quantities that make it worth this for us to harvest them. The really cool thing about honey is it never goes bad. So we have actually found jars of honey in like the Egyptian pyramids, and they can open the jar and eat it and it would be totally fine. It has no expiration date whatsoever. You can use it, I've had students do this seems kind of gross to me, but you can use it to like heal wounds or infections or fungus or anything like that, because it doesn't bring in that bacteria. The bees themselves, the way they work together is absolutely just crazy. We've got some wasp in here, and that's a big predator to bees. And you can look these videos up, but if a wasp gets in a beehive, they will surround that bee or that wasp. They will flap their wings towards it and create so much air heat they will fry the wasp. So one bee is not going to take on a wasp, but together they can do that. They communicate through a waggle dance, and you can see some of them do that. So if they go somewhere and they find a really cool nectar source, they come back to the hive. They are mostly visual communicators, and so they'll do this dance. They'll shake their abdomen, and they'll go in a circle. And how frequently they shake is like how far away it is, and then it's like as to the direction of the sun. And we've learned that if another bee headbutts that bee, they will stop dancing. And basically what they're saying is like, dude, I've been to that location. There's like, it's a playground with screaming kids, or there's like spiders. Don't go there. So they actually do a headbutting technique to stop that dance. And so really, really cool stuff. So one of the things I do in my classes when we get started, and I'm going to have you guys take some of these and pass them down if you like honey. I'm going to give you guys two different types of honey. Does anyone know what makes honey taste a certain way? Like honey looks and tastes based on something. Anyone know? Yeah, the flowers that they collect the nectar from. So I've got two different kinds here, and I want everybody to get one of each for me. If you don't like honey, then you just pass it on. But if you guys will just pass those down. Get a dark straw and a light straw. You can do this activity. You can buy these on Amazon. 100 pack of them costs like $12, and is a really, really cool way to illustrate this in class, even if you don't have a hive. That might be enough for everyone, but we can just set these on tables if everyone got both kinds, or at least coming your way. Okay, perfect. I can set these up here. So I would recommend trying the dark one first if you haven't already like dug in. I think it's kind of gross. I don't know what you guys think about it. These are from the same variety of bees. They're from the same company. There's only one difference in these two types, and it's the nectar, the type of flower that they fed off of. So if you try the dark one, it's actually wildflower honey. Anybody think this is really gross? Anyone grossed out by this? Yeah. I'm not a big fan. I usually make the students taste this one first when I teach because they get this horrible taste in their mouth, and had a girl like run across the room and like spit up in a trash can, like maybe a little dramatic. But that's this one right here. This one may seem a little more familiar. Like I feel like I need some sopapillas with this thing. This is clover honey. That's what you typically get at a store. So you can do this in class. Really, really cheap activity to kind of introduce them. I bought these on Amazon. Like I said, a pack of 100 of these is like $12. And so I buy 2 packs of these. I have the students taste them in class. It really illustrates because most of them like the light honey, and we talk about kind of what they go to and what they feed on and different things like that. So kind of a cool activity. So my goal here today is kind of show you guys what we do in terms of maintaining bees. Hopefully, if any of you are interested, helping reduce some stress and worry of like, we can't do this at our ag building, we're going to get fired, like this is going to end really bad. You can do it, trust me. Like I know we're in a school farm and then we're in the middle of nowhere, so that's why I agreed to do it. Mr. Nipper can tell you he was really concerned when I first brought bees that this was going to go very badly for our program. But now I'm to the point where if I was at somewhere else in the middle of school, my ag building was by the high school, I would still feel comfortable having a hive of bees, and I think I'd be totally okay. So we went to that honeybee farm, Hunter's Honeybee Farm in Indiana in 2008, came back. I was fascinated with all the random knowledge, kind of like some of the stuff I just shared with you guys. And so I taught this to my class, and then when we went to state convention, I left the kids behind to do like a bee presentation, like you have to create your own, bee farm, what kind of hives. And a couple of kids online found these hives right here, and I have it on the front of your paper. It's called Beekeeping. And there are these hexagon-shaped boxes. You can fit together as many of them as you want. I actually have 2 hives here. So these 2 are connected right here, so the bees come in and out. And these 2 are connected right here. They come in and out as well. And they have these tubes right here. So what they market them to is like someone in their living room can mount this on the wall, run it out their window, like think of like a window unit or something, run it out, and the bees can come in and out and you can see everything. This takes obviously a lot of liability away. So I have kids that are allergic to bees that can get this far from the glass, look at it, and they have no concern of getting stung. You can see all the process, like you can watch them lay eggs. I'll show you how you can tell the difference here in a little bit between the capped honey and the capped brood or eggs, and so you can look at all that. The negative aspects to these beekeesystems are that we will never be able to collect honey. I mean, we can't get in there. They probably will not make enough to last them through the winter. Like those jars up top that you see, there's a mesh up top, and I'll put a sugar water mixture, and I'll probably be feeding them daily in the months of like February and March until the nectar starts flowing in April. So that's kind of a negative. Also, if there were a lot of problems with like, let's say pests or something like that, I don't know how I would really get in there and maintain them. So there's a lot of luck maybe compared to a traditional one. And I'm going to show you this one. This is more of a traditional hive. You can keep adding boxes. The negative aspect of this is I really can't hover kids around it outside. The positive aspect, and what we're planning on doing is next year getting a hive or 2 out back, is that you'd be able to collect honey, and we can show the honey processing and different things like that. And you guys can use lots of funds. We're using Carl Perkins money this year to get 25 beekeeping suits. And so when we have these outside, students can actually go outside, be totally covered, and be good. So so we set those up. Like I said, you can add as many of them as you want. When we first set these up, I put them in the greenhouse. And this is where I said, remember I said 1 or 2 things can go wrong, and I did one of them. So I set them up in the greenhouse, and I thought, oh, this will be great. We planted a blackberry patch right outside, and I was like, they'll go outside, they'll pollinate the blackberry patch, like things will be great. Well, bees do not want to be in direct sunlight inside their hive, and y'all know how a greenhouse feels in the summer. Regardless of how good you are with your cool cell and shade cloth, like it gets hot in there, right? And so the maintenance guy was out here spraying, and I said, hey, anytime you spray, let me know, because we can lock them up. That tube right there has a flap. Like at the end of May, we had elementary kids out here. All the garage doors were open. I locked the bees up all day, so there was no concern whatsoever. And so that's what I did. And by the way, bees, I'm going to throw just a million facts. I go everywhere here on bees. Nipper can tell you I'm a nerd. But bees only go out during the daytime because they're so big on sight. So if you ever need to lock them up, you just wait till the sun goes down, lock up that hive. They're not going to venture out at night. and then you can do whatever if you need to transport it or whatever. So I waited till night because the guy was going to spray weed killer, and I thought that could be a problem. So I locked him up. This was in July. He came out and did his next round of weed killer, and the greenhouse got so hot and they couldn't go outside to cool off. And I come back in, and it was just a mountain of about 15, 20,000 dead bees. Killed all but about 300 of them. And it was awful because we had filled it full of honeycomb. They were making honey, like everything was going great, but I locked them up and they couldn't get out and regulate their temperature, and so they died. So lesson learned, we replaced the panel in the greenhouse. We brought them in here. In terms of heating them in the winter, it's not a problem. The bees cluster together. The center of that cluster is about 95 degrees. And in fact, it was really cool when we got them in April. There was a 40-degree morning, and the glass was fogged up, and the kids could put their hand up against the plexiglass, and it felt warm. So they can keep themselves pretty warm. So you can do something like this. They don't go very far, and you can look out back later and see they fly in and out. As long as the kids aren't within about 20 foot of that wall, they have no concern whatsoever. So as long as you can block off, 20 foot, I mean, that's about as far away as I am from you guys. As long as you can keep it where people don't get that close, you're golden, okay? So if you have a building that's 100 foot away, that's not a problem, okay? And if you have an activity out here, you can lock them up. They don't go far. Occasionally, like once or twice a year, they will swarm, which is basically where they have a new queen. The old queen takes half the hive and she goes somewhere else. So that's the only times where they really get everywhere. Bees normally go 2 to 3 miles often to find their food source. So it's not like they're going to be right here, because I had concerns about kids. We have a playground on the other side of that woods right there, and I just knew little Timmy was going to get stung and they were going to try to tie it back to us. But we didn't have any of those problems. So I can tell you, first of all, like this, no concern whatsoever. So how do I do this? How do I get started? You can get these right here. If you look, like I said, I've kind of got some steps on here of like things that I bought. And this is just my way of doing it. I mean, there's lots of different ways to do this. I'm no expert on this whatsoever. Some resources you can look at if you look on the back right here. Penn State has a Beekeeping 101 online class that will tell you basically everything you need to know. It's $120. You can download all their PowerPoints and all their curriculum and steal it and teach it to your students like I did. They go through everything from like the different types of beehives and the different pests and the nutrition of them, and like it's fantastic. During COVID, I was locked at home and they were offering these classes for free. So I got it for free, but I would definitely recommend it's every bit worth the $120. So that's good. Touring the Hunter's Honey Farm in Martinsville, Indiana, that's good. My dad did a beekeeping class at his local tech center, and a lot of them will offer that. It was like 6 weeks, one night a week, like Wednesday nights for 6 weeks. And then also if you look on, let's say, Facebook, there are local beekeeping associations, and so they can help you maybe get a free hive or something like that, okay? In terms of buying them, there's 2 ways you can buy them. So the problem with these is, once again, access. Like the day that we put the bees in there was kind of scary, because like, how are you going to put the bees in there? And so the top of this first paper tells you, or the right here tells you where I get mine from. It's Beekeeping, etc., Beekeeping ETC. They're out of Oklahoma City, and you normally get your hives in the 1st to middle of April. And they ship them from Georgia. And so you put in an order. You want to put that order in before Christmas. They order them. They come in. They don't give you any warning, so that's stressful. They will call you at like 4 o'clock one afternoon and be like, hey, you have to come get these tomorrow. They're here. And we know how the month of April is, right? So that's kind of stressful. Miss Horton had to like cover my classes that morning so I could go get the bees. And so, but there's 2 ways of doing it. This is, if you have this kind of hive, this is the box that they will come in. This is a 3-pound box right here, and it's just full of bees. There's about 10,000 bees in here when it comes in. This lid right here, inside of it has like, looks like a Campbell's soup can. It's full of syrup. And then there's a little queen container. So you have all the worker bees, all the female bees, and then you have that little queen container right there. And so you'll take this off. You'll take the queen off. You'll put her in there. I haven't got into like types of bees yet, but the queen, I guess I should get into that really quick. So I've got pictures up here. There's 3 different types of bees, and you can see as you get closer. The first one is the queen, and so the queen is the only sexually developed female bee, meaning she's the only one that can reproduce. And how she does that is the worker bees make this special white substance called royal jelly, and they give it to her when she's a larva, and it makes her develop, where the other bees don't get that kind of stuff. She hatches out and she goes on a mating flight. and she'll be bred by up to about 12 males. Now, what's really kind of weird about this, and when I'm teaching this to 9th graders like I normally do, I got to tiptoe around some of this stuff, because the male will breed her, he will die, the process will kill him, and then she will store all of that semen inside of her, and it will breed her for her entire life. So she will never be bred again. So she stores all that semen inside of her, and then she can choose the gender of each egg that she lays. If she fertilizes that egg with the semen, it will turn into a female. But if she doesn't fertilize it, it'll turn into a male. So she can actually control that. So she goes on her mating flight, she comes back, and she starts laying eggs. She'll lay about 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day, and that's all she'll do. She won't even feed herself. The worker bees will put the food in her mouth for her. Sounds like a pretty nice life, but they are counting how many eggs that she lays, and if her production drops, they will drag her outside, kill her, replace her with a new queen. So there's a little bit of stress there, right? So that's the queen bee. The ones that are not sexually developed, and how you can tell, and my pictures have kind of fallen down, she is longer than the other bees. So she's long and skinny, but her wings are still the same length. So it makes it look like her wings are really short. They only cover like half of her back, where the worker bees are smaller and their wings will cover their entire back because the wings are the same. So the worker bees are the females. They are the non-sexually developed, and they do all the work. So when they're first hatched out, they will nurse the other ones. They'll eventually do a lot of hive stuff. Bees are very sanitary. They don't like dead bodies to pile up. So you'll see some bees in their entire job is just dragging the dead out. You'll see this bee carrying another bee that's like twice its size. It's kind of entertaining. So they'll drag the dead bees out. And then as they get older, they'll be foragers, and they will literally work themselves to death. In the winter, a worker bee will live about 6 months. But in the summertime, they'll only live 6 weeks because their body will physically give out from how hard they work. So if you've ever been stung by a bee, you've been stung by a female. I don't know what that says, but only the females have stingers. The males are called the drones, and you can see them when you first get your bees in. You won't get any drones. You should get all females in your hive. The males are worthless. They have one purpose, and that is to breed the queen. But she's only bred at one point in her life. So if you keep the same queen for 2 or 3 years, the drones are worthless. You'll notice them, they are wider and bigger than the other bees, and they also have huge eyes. Like their entire front is covered with these 2 massive eyeballs. But they don't do anything. They take a week longer to hatch out than the females, and they sit in their little honeycomb for the first 2 days. Because why leave? The females are going to keep feeding me. They don't forage. They don't have stingers, so their abdomen is round versus pointy. But in the wintertime, when resources are scarce, the females will kick them all out and they'll die, and we start over with the new. So when I look in this hive right now, I can see lots of males that have hatched out. If you came back here in January, you would only see, the females. So those are your different types, and you can see some pictures, and then you guys can come up and look at that later. So getting back to shipping this right here, when they ship this queen, the other bees do not accept her. She gives off pheromones. They don't recognize those pheromones. They're like, this is not my queen, and they want to kill her. So she's in her own little container by herself hanging right here, and there's a sugar capsule that they have to eat through to get to her. And so they're swarming around her. They want to kill her. They're shipped all the way from Georgia, and during that transition time, they slowly get used to her pheromones. By the time they eat through this and get to the queen bee, they're totally loyal to her. They'll do anything for her. They went from wanting to kill her. And the queen sets the tone for the entire hive. So if you ever have an aggressive hive that wants to swarm and try to sting people, if you can get the queen out and replace her with the new one, sometimes that will fix the entire attitude because they all feed off kind of what she does. So like I said, this is how they ship in. We take this right here, we take it off, we put the queen container down inside there, because if you put the queen in there, they're going to follow. If I was outside, I wouldn't be worried about that at all. In here, we can kind of see a problem, right? So I open that, we slap this. The kids love seeing this. You slap this, all the bees fall to the bottom, and you turn it real quick. Sounds like this could go horribly wrong, right? But it didn't. And this hole goes right on the top. The queen container is down at the bottom, and then you just leave it there for about a day, and they will all fly through. Some of them will not, and those are the ones that are now dead inside here. But most of them will get down in there, and then they take off from there. Some things that you guys need if you're starting a beehive, so some tools and some different things that I want to show you guys. What about in terms of safety? I don't wear anything, and different people have different attitudes about this. I don't wear anything. I've been stung once, never out here, but I was stung once with my dad's hive. But if you're going to wear, and this is me versus your kids, which obviously has some liability, but I don't wear anything. If I was going to wear something, wear this helmet, it goes over your head, and it also has these things that your arms can go through. So it kind of comes, you know, like right here. So you can wear this. These are the beekeeping gloves, but I mean, get some welding gloves out of your shop. The benefit of these, of course, is that they will suck up against your arm, where those big bulky leather welding gloves, they might be able to get in there. So this might be the things you wear. Obviously, if I was taking kids out there, they'd have to be wearing the suits, right? Some other tools that we need. This is the smoker. So you can put different fuel sources in there and you smoke it. What it actually does, it doesn't drive the bees away. It drives them down inside of the hive. And so when they have that smoke in their minds, they think, forest fire, oh crap, I'm going to have to leave my hive and never come back. I need to go down to the bottom of the hive and eat as much honey as I can so I have energy, because I don't know when I'm going to eat again. So when you smoke it, they go to the bottom and it gives you an opportunity to kind of get down in there. So this is a good tool to have. This right here is probably the single most important tool. It has a million different functions. It's called a hive tool. The bees inside here, they make this wax. They take that sap that gets on trees and they spit it up and chew it, and they make this entire like enclosure inside of it. It keeps away like bacteria and fungus and diseases, and so it's really hard to open it. And so you take this to pry it, and it's got a bunch of different purposes, but you can't just open that up normally. And then the other of the three big tools that you need, this is a bee brush. It's like the softest brush you'll ever feel. If I need to get the bees off the frame, this is what I would knock them off with. This is a traditional hive, so if you guys don't go this route, like I said, these are pretty expensive, $200, $250 a box. You're looking at about $1,000 right there, okay? This right here is your more traditional hive. Just drew a blank. There's three different types. There's top bar. This is a Langstroth beehive, and there's a third one I don't remember. But this is the traditional hive that you can put. So the kids love taking this apart in class. They love playing with the old honeycomb. Like I have this more honestly right now just as a teaching tool. Eventually it'll have bees on it. Bees hate water, so you'll notice we've got, of course, a metal roof. You never want them to get wet. If you put them outside, the other thing is they will keep themselves warm, but the wind is not good. They hate the wind. So if you've got them in the winter and you're doing a traditional hive outside, the one thing you're looking for is a windbreak. You want where that wind can't get in. I've seen people like stack hay bales around them. You don't want this to sit directly on the ground. So I've had kids, freshmen in shop, make a little metal stand that's about this far on the ground, and it just fits on there, okay? So we take our roof off. We've got another roof right here. Obviously this isn't going to keep the water out, but this is where I can stick that smoker down there and smoker to drive them down. This is my opening right here. One thing you'll find out really quick about bees is everything in nature wants to get in this beehive. They want the honey. Mice want to get in here in the winter to bed down. They will chew up the honeycomb, and they won't even eat the honey, but they'll want to make like a nest. So the bees don't want to see this. This is way too big of an opening, right? So I have this right here. Now this is the only place they can come in and out. If I want to transport them, I will turn it, and then I can cover the entire thing if I wanted to. But this is their entrance in and out. And then we have these different boxes. These boxes are called supers. And the cool thing about this Langstroth is I can keep adding supers, okay? The bottom super right here, this needs to be the honey for them. So if you're thinking, I'm going to go get honeybees next April, and we're going to harvest honey in class, you'll harvest honey the second year. They make the first. Now sometimes they'll go crazy and you'll be okay, but usually that first year you will not get any honey for yourself. Okay, so this first box is all for them. If you look at these in here, this is a deep super right here. This is a medium super, and there's also a shallow super. I don't really know why you would want one of those. Normally we just continue. You may have two deep supers and then a lot of these medium ones right here. Inside here, we have this honeycomb right here. Normally you'll buy this and it'll have just the black. This is from an old hive that my dad had. So they will build on this. They do like if you can buy some, like if you know someone who used to be a beekeeper and has some of this old honeycomb, they like that because they can build off of it. The dark that you can see in the very top hive, that's from last year's beehive that died. So I took that honeycomb, I froze it to get rid of any pests or parasites or ants, and then I put it back in there, and when I first got those bees, they were immediately drawn to that. Because if they're not happy, they're going to leave, and you just pay $200 for, a set of bees, and they're gone. So, but one thing I do in class is I always take these out, set them on the table. The kids love to look at them and play with them. Sometimes that's not good. These are all little 8th graders finger pokings, but we're here to teach. So, you know, it was really cool for them. It was hands-on. When they walk in and these are sitting on their tables, it just sets the mood that, like, we're gonna do something fun today. We're not just gonna sit up here and listen to me yap, okay? So you have the different boxes. Like I said, this is the medium super. These are the deep supers. One thing that's kind of cool, and I'm trying to see if I can find one that's built off one of these. Obviously, children's destruction of stabbing these things. They will make some of these bigger cells like this right here, and these bigger cells are queen cells. So if you see this inside the hive, you know one of two things are fixing to happen. They're fixing to swarm, and half the hive is going to leave with their new queen, or they're not happy with the current queen and they're going to take her out, okay? And if you don't like that, you can go in and like break these off and knock them off. But these tell them, give this one that royal jelly, that special stuff that makes her develop. You want these to be totally full. If you see this one right here, as I tilt it, you see there's no gaps. Once again, there's all kinds of parasites and things that can get in. The more space there is for something to possibly get in, and that's not good. So you don't want that. Any questions? I know I've talked a million miles an hour. If you guys have any questions, you know, regarding any of this, please
Do you have issues
stop me.
with mice, like getting the one on the wall?
Mice? Mice?
Other insects too.
Mice, I have not had any issue with mice. It's far enough off the ground and it's in here. What I did notice yesterday is I have an ant problem. And bugs are a major issue because most everything that's going to kill the ants are going to kill the bees. So instead of spraying bug killer around the outside, I'm going to put the ant bait stations along the floor because they keep going up and down and they will make them really mad. That is a problem though, is like in this instance, if we were infested with something, like, what am I going to do? So.
Can they carry a mix into the hive, or is it something like the granular type where they would carry it into?
Well,
They carry it up into the hive?
I'm a little worried about that, but I've noticed the ants are coming up here and they're going down to somewhere down here. So I figured if I put it along the ground, they're going to carry it with them. It's kind of my hope. Speaking of that, some pests that you have to worry about. The biggest pest issue you have are what we call varroa mites. And varroa mites are little red, they're like ticks basically that will get on the bees. And the way I can explain it to my kids, regardless of how you feel about this, like I kind of compare it to like COVID, right? Or like the flu or something like that. Your hive's going to have it. There's going to be some varroa mites on there. But there's a certain level at which you might respond to it and a certain level at which you just like, it's all good. So one cool activity that you can actually do, and I don't know the specifics on it, I haven't noticed any varroa mites. You will see little red dots on your bees. But you can take just any old jar. You can take a cup, like a measuring cup like you're cooking. 1 cup of bees, if we're cooking here. Dump the bees inside there. Dump powdered sugar on there. Shake it up really good. Have a white piece of paper and turn it upside down. The bees will fly off. That sugar will make the varroa mites fall off. And there's a certain number, you can look it up online, of like how many varroa mites per cup of bees is a problem for me to treat it. And so that's a problem. We do have biosecurity issues like we might have with a lot of other different types of animals in that there are some diseases that can spread really bad. You don't want to take honey from someone else's hive and put it in here or anything like that. Don't do that because that can spread diseases. The worst disease, there's an American and a European foul brood, and you'll notice it by where the babies are, it will turn black. That brood will turn black. It's a horrible disease. Compare that to the African swine fever. Compared to something like that. Like if I get those, I'm burning my hives because that disease can stay dormant in your hives for up to 40 years. So if we were to get some kind of disease like that in there, yeah, we're way out of luck. Okay, so yeah, just watching that right there. The 3 biggest threats to bees in the United States per that Penn State class is the varroa mites, that foul brood disease, and bears. But here we don't normally have that problem. But obviously everything else is a slow death to the bees. A bear is going to come in one night and you're just going to have stuff everywhere, right? They're not picking at it. So you can see some videos in certain areas where people will like build fences and things. They're as weird as it sounds, they're obviously easier to keep out than, let's say, the varroa mites if you can build a structure around it. But normally that's not something we really have to worry about here in Oklahoma. So any other questions? Yeah, so on average, bees will normally go about 2 to 3 miles to get their food sources. So you don't have to necessarily have a close food source. You guys, in a little bit, like I said, I'll try to end early so we can look out there. If you look out there, one activity we did in classes, we planted a pollinator garden. And so it's got all kinds of flowers, so they can go out and feed on that. But all the times I've been out there, I've never seen any bees in it. They go off to the pastures, they like clover. So they will go a long way. You don't necessarily have to have a close source. The one thing you do need, bees will drink water, and they'll carry that water back to their hives. So a 5-gallon bucket of water right outside your hive. I've got one. I was looking at it this morning. I haven't cleaned it out since April, so it's really gross. But having that out there, you want to have that water bucket out there. Any other questions?
Location and environment.
Okay.
Well, I mean, a setup for a person starting out at, or a student starting out at their home, what's the best location to try to establish a hive? And then how the environment kind of plays into that.
The biggest thing you're looking for is an area of a windbreak. And then obviously trying to keep people, 10 to 20 feet away from getting really close. Shade can be good, but the bees do leave and self-regulate temperature, so normally too hot is not a problem. If you look at that tube, it's pretty hot today. If you look at that tube outside, they beard off the outside, so it looks like a beard hanging off right here. They'll go out there, they'll cool off, they'll come back inside. So a shade can be good, but really the windbreak is the most important thing. Other than that, like I said, I know people that live here in town, like a backyard in town where we can't keep animals or anything, but they have bees. If you do that, the one thing that people have done is once the bees, kind of like a plane taking off, once they get up high in the air, they'll stay higher in the air, they won't bother us. So people will build, like, let's say like a security fence just right around their beehive area, so when the bees come out, they have to come up. And let's say they're 10 foot in the air, now those bees are 10 foot in the air, they're not going to come down in people's yards. I mean, like maybe one or two, but like they're not going to swarm down. They're going to go to a food source. So if you're in town, that would be something I would look into as well. Maybe having a fence around it. And if you're doing it at your school farm and your school's worried about it, that would also be a good solution, right? Like, I don't know that it actually makes a difference in the end, but I think if your administrator sees a fence around this, they're going to feel better, which makes your life a lot easier. So that's probably the big things in environment.
You said you would not have a problem with taxes or would you use this system or?
Yeah, you can do either one. You could have these out there. I just like this for the learning purposes of being able to see everything. So that's why I prefer this. Like, the only reason that we're going to do a couple of these is so that kids can learn the honey processing and stuff like that. This hive, when it's out there and it has bees one day, will probably have very little interaction with students compared to those. So just from a teaching standpoint, I love those.
Did the hives on the plexiglass, do you have to go in and clean them out at some point?
No.
Or they'll just always take care of themselves?
They're very clean and hygienic. They have, some worker bees have a roll of house bees. They'll get in there, they'll clean it. I mean, they carry out all the dead. Yeah.
No build up of the hive material or honey or?
No. Now, I do say, the one thing I will say, they have these little pull-out things right here. So some things will fall through right here, and I can take this out and clean it as well. But they're super sanitary. They don't like being wet. They don't like being dirty. They don't like buildup of stuff. So they do a very, very good job of maintaining their hives on their own. So the things that if you had one of these hives or this hive, what am I looking for when I check them? Like if your student's checking to see if things look good, what we want to see is that queen needs to be laying eggs. If she dies, we need to replace her. Remember I said these bees only live about 6 weeks this time of year. It takes, depending on the gender of the bee, it can take up to 3 weeks for a bee to hatch out. So, 6 weeks from now, every bee in there except the queen is going to be dead, and there's going to be new bees. So if I have a queen die, I've got to act fast. So what I'm looking for, and like I said, I definitely want you guys to have some chance to come up here and look at this. But when you come up here, if you look in this bottom corner right here, they will lay an egg in there, and then that egg will turn into larvae. So you can see the little white worms in there. But then in a normal hive, what you see, and you guys can kind of see it from here, that bottom right corner, see how it's like kind of an orangish color right there? That's capped brood. And so they basically put a wax cell, I'll move this out of the way so you guys can see that, a wax cell over the top of those, and those babies will start to develop. They spin a cocoon just like a caterpillar turning it into a butterfly. So I need to see that. If I'm checking my hive and I'm lifting these out this time of year, I need to see cat brood. If I don't see brood inside my frames, the queen is dead or she's not doing her job and I need to replace her. You can buy those queens online for like $50 and they'll ship them to you. Otherwise, if I don't find that out for 2 or 3 weeks, then I get the queen in, half the hive's dead, she's laying eggs, but they're going to take so long to develop that hive's going to die. So that's the biggest thing we've got to check. The other thing that we're looking at is their honey buildup, obviously. Because bees are so sanitary, when you guys come up here, like I said, look here for the babies, and you can actually look in this spot right here and see the little worms larvae. Up here, this hive is doing a better job of laying eggs. This hive is doing a better job of honey production. What I want you to see right here, instead of a cap, it's got just a wax sheet over it. So because bees are so sanitary, they create the honey, and then they want to seal it. Because if they walk over it a lot, the honey will turn black and dark, and they don't like that so much. And you can actually see that because around the corners, the seal that they've made is really white, and the middle where they've sealed is really dark because they've walked over it so many times. And so you want to see that capped honey. What I want to see in one of those frames is if I'm ready to harvest it, I should pull it out, and it's all covered in that wax, that white, like wax sheet. I love the Stillwater wind. Something else with that. I don't remember. So we want to see that totally covered. Oh, the other thing I was going to say. So one thing that a lot of people do this time of year is you notice there's cat brood and there's honey. When I harvest this, I don't want cat brood in my honey, right? I don't want like babies and larvae and all that kind of stuff. So you can put a queen excluder. And so I put it between these two boxes right here. And it's a wire mesh deal that you can buy that the openings are just big enough that the worker bees can come through, but the queen cannot get through. So that forces her, the worker bees will still keep making honey up here, but the queen will stay down here. So when I take these out and want to process that honey, I know that there will be no larvae or anything, in there that's not desirable. So your students that are just starting out, y'all probably seen lots of wild hives like take up residence in people's houses or on, fence posts or whatever. This is something really cool that we have not succeeded on in class. But when bees get too big, they will swarm, like I mentioned. So they'll hatch out a new queen. She normally takes over. The old queen takes half the hive and leaves. That sounds really bad, like, oh crap, I just lost half my bees. But it's a good thing because too many bees in there, they're going to starve to death in the winter. So this right here is a swarm trap. And a swarm trap is just a box. It's got, the same frames all the way filled up in there. And it's got one opening here. This is actually not. This has a mesh covering. The other side has a hole that looks just like this that they can go in and out. And I've got a hole right here, and I actually can mount this on a tree somewhere. And what I do is they love lemongrass oil. So what I'll do is if I want to attract them, I'll spray some at the entrance. No more than that, because if it's an overwhelming smell, the bees are like, something's up. So they got to have kind of a natural flow smell. Put this, hang it on the tree, and those scout bees will come down there. They will sniff this. They'll go back to the hives. They'll do that waggle dance like, dude, I found this cool place. They'll all go together, that hive, and they'll get in here. So this is a way that you can trap a hive and get a hive for free. So my students really enjoy this right here. We mount it on the tree out back. We check it every couple of days. We didn't catch anything, but the kids like that. And if your students are trying to get a hive, let's say my dad, for example, he had 2 hives just like this, and that horrible 17 days that never got above freezing killed both of his hives. So he put swarm traps out so that he can catch bees and replace them for free. So doing this is a really, really cool project. You can buy these online just like you can buy these. They either come assembled or not assembled. So if you're teaching like, what I was thinking next year is if I get a couple of these, my 8th graders can learn about woodworking and we can assemble these, then they can learn about bees and it all kind of ties and flows together. But these swarm traps are really cool for catching.
Certain
Questions?
areas that you've seen bees, or can you just put them up anywhere?
Fence lines. Fence lines are great because when this swarm wants to leave, they're going to go to the fence line first. They want to find a good, like when they first swarm, there was a big old ball on the wall of the greenhouse, or the ag building. But I mean, it was kind of hot. So they were there for maybe an hour, and then they left and went somewhere else. So I would put this, there's a mowed spot, the straight path to the tree line, and that's where I have it hung. So that's where they should go. And sometimes they will, and sometimes they won't. I mean, it's their decision. If you have a ball somewhere, like you see a ball on a fence post or a tree limb, you can capture those yourself. Remember, they're going to go where the queen goes. So if you're, now this time I would wear this, but if you suit up, put this underneath it, and then knock them all down in here, as long as you get the queen down in there, they're all going to stay with her. So some people will go around. There's a lady on YouTube. You can look it up and show her kids in class. I don't know her name. But she goes around. She doesn't like suit up or anything. And she catches like all these wild swarms. So you can show that to your kids in class. But what I thought about doing was, it was the last day of school. They swarmed against the building. I had to run to the junior high for a last day of school meeting. When I came back, I was going to put this underneath them and knock them down in there. But I came back an hour later and they had left. So I missed out on getting a free hive of bees. So, other questions on this?
Now, if you got to replace the new queen bee, is there a specific way you got to do that one? Because I know you said in that package they try to kill the other queen. How do you introduce the new one?
When you get it shipped, it'll be in a container. And I've got one, but I didn't get them out, and the honeycomb's all around it, so you can't see it. But like I said, it's about this big around, it's about this long, and it's got a tube with the sugar capsule. You put it in there. I think, and normally the beekeeper who sends it to you will have instructions, but normally you keep the plastic cap on so they can't even start eating through for a day or two. Then you take the cap off, and it takes them about 2 days to eat through and get to her. And yeah, they'll accept her. So if I'm opening a hive, the things that I should be checking is the cat brood, the honey, and any mites or parasites or anything that, shouldn't be in there. So those are the big things that I want to check in hive maintenance.
How do you get the queen in those, since it's all closed?
So on top, right, like where these jars are, on top, there's a hole about this big, and it's got mesh covering, because the idea is I'll put this jar on top, and it'll drip that sugar water into them for them to drink. So I took this off. I dropped this. All this honeycomb wasn't made. I mean, they made it. So I dropped her down. You can actually you can see the cage. So I'll show you that in a minute. The cage is right there. So I dropped it down, and then I flipped it over, and they all like flew in there and went to her and got her out. And sometimes this hive got her out within a day. This hive, it took her 5 days to get her out. And I was really worried that she was going to die inside there. And in that instance, you might try opening it and like poking a hole in it, to get them there, because sometimes just some hives are more active than others. It's about 5 more minutes. Any other questions?
On a traditional setup, do you recommend a top feeder or a front feeder?
We use the front feeders. Or my dad does. That's what we use. But I don't really have a rhyme or reason as to why.
I didn't know
But
if there was one really better than the other. We've used a top feeder before. I should know
Okay.
if one was better or if it's just personal.
I think it's just a personal preference.
What is it you're talking about?
Feeding them. So in the winter, you've got to feed them a couple of different things. You want that sugar water source, but then we also make pollen patties. I don't know if you guys have given yours that, but I've got some in the freezer back there. It was a cool lesson we did in class. Bees need protein to lay eggs. And so about January, February-ish, we give them these pollen patties, and we put them right outside. You don't want to put them out for like a small amount that they can eat, and it's not there, because if it's there a long time, it'll attract outside things because they smell really sweet, and they'll carry that in. But you want to feed them in the winter, especially these hives. Your other hives, like if you carry a bunch of honey over to the winter, you may not have to feed them at all. These, we can't hold that much honey in there. Like I'm going to have to feed them like crazy, I'm sure, after Christmas. Like that's another downfall of those.
Have you used, well, I don't know, we did this, but we also, instead of sugar water during the winter, because that inner cover that has more of the lip on that one side, did the sugar board.
Okay, yeah.
So I didn't,
Actually, that's better.
that's what we tried doing that.
Yeah. So bees urinate, just like people, right? And bees are very sanitary. So in the cold, they won't leave. So like today, bees are leaving the hive, they're going out peeing, coming back in, right? In the wintertime, they won't leave. So we a lot of times switch to like some type of sugar solid. My dad even gives peppermints to his bees. because that's a low water content. If it's a high water content, they may still not leave the hive because they don't want to soil it in there, and their bladders will burst. So going to a drier sugar source, yeah, that's a really good idea. I've got on the back of that paper to kind of show you, like, if you're teaching and you know nothing about, what you're doing, I've kind of got a 10-lesson breakdown of, like, the order that I teach my kids. There's a lot of stuff I didn't cover here today because there's a lot to beekeeping. But those are the 10 lessons. So, like, you could cover that, and that would be a 2-week, some of those lessons may take more than one day, 2 or 3 week unit that you can teach your kids. So that kind of tells you how I teach it and the activities that I do. I want to end, of course, a minute or two early for you guys to come up here. You can even pop out that door and see the tube. You can see them coming in and out. You can see our pollinator garden. You can see the cat brood, all that kind of stuff. So I'll let you guys check that out, and we'll stop right here. If you have any other questions, please let me know.
Would you say to
Yeah.
avoid